Hi everybody, it's Laura from Green Tree, and today we're talking about raw foods. So I'm not going to get super detailed on this because it's a huge thing, but I just want to give you some of the basics of what raw typically means and what raw cooking can actually entail. So raw foods include things that you might already think of, like live probiotic foods that are fermented, and also it can include prepared things like these delicious little chocolate tarts. The main criteria for a food to be raw is that it has never been heated above a temperature, and this varies from person to person, but never been heated above a temperature between 104 and 115 degrees. The threshold is usually somewhere in there. The reason for this is around 118, enzyme activity stops. That's when the enzymes are shut down, they're not working anymore in the food, and you're not getting those properties from that live food anymore. Now, with things that are unpasteurized, as well as being raw, like the sea stag kraut that I showed you, or say the apple cider vinegar. If you have never tried this stuff, by the way, this is great. I take this every single day. You know, I'm not a doctor, I just like it personally. But so something like this that's unpasteurized, these have live cultures and enzymes in them. So there's actually, these are foods that are essentially capable of replicating themselves. You can take an unprocessed product like apple cider and mix it with the apple cider vinegar, and there are enough enzymes in here to turn it into more apple cider vinegar. You can take the brine from this and mix it up with your new vegetables, and as long as you've got a high enough salt content, that will ferment, because these foods are alive. Now, something doesn't have to be alive to be raw. So something like a banana, I mean, that is a raw food. It doesn't necessarily have to be a living food. It doesn't have all of these different kinds of cultures in it. You could dehydrate it, which is a very popular method of raw cooking, and it would still be a raw food, but it wouldn't be living anymore. So, if you want to get more information on kind of the specifics of this, as weird as it sounds, maybe get yourself a raw cookbook. I actually have a couple of these. This one's probably my favorite. It's called Annie's Raw Food Kitchen. Annie's is spelled A-N-I''S. I've got another one called The Art of Living Raw Food, or sorry, The Art of Raw Living Food. This one's pretty good too. I've made a lot more stuff out of this one. So the basic things that you're gonna need to make raw foods are a food processor and a blender. If you have those two things, well, and a knife, you're probably going to need to chop a lot of stuff up. If you have those two appliances, you can make a lot of raw foods. If you wanted to get into like breads, crackers, cookies, those kinds of things, you're probably also going to need a dehydrator. Some examples, well, this will be backwards if I show you, so I guess I'm not going to flip through it, but I've made raw pumpkin pie out of this cookbook that actually turned out really well. You can eat squash raw. I've made like raw rice, that's really good. You can do crackers, scrambles, pâtés. There are a lot of nuts and seeds in raw cooking. So there's a huge variety of things you can eat. Raw food doesn't just mean lettuce and apples. Hi, Sunshine. I just got a shout out there. So yeah, there's a huge variety. I mean, you can see she's eating a sandwich here, and this sandwich is raw. Raw doesn't limit you to carrots. It doesn't limit you to just the flat vegetables. Now, while this book is vegan, and while a lot of raw cookbooks are vegan, not all raw food is. There are people who consume raw animal products. Things like milk, other types of dairy, eggs, meats. But there is inherently more risk involved in consuming raw animal products than raw plant products. So, for example, I've eaten sushi. I probably will eat sushi again at some point. But I know that there are inherently risks to eating that kind of raw animal product. That is much less when you are eating raw fruits, vegetables, seeds, nuts, those types of things, especially if you wash them properly. So that is something you do have to consider with raw cooking. If you're not going to be cooking any of the food that you are consuming, you want to make sure that the space where you're preparing it is extra clean. You want to have something natural that you can sanitize your cutting boards and your appliances with. A lot of people will use things like food grade peroxide. You could use bleach. You definitely want to at least have soap and water involved, because it's super, super important when you're not cooking anything that all of your areas, your preparation areas, are very, very clean. So, if you're curious about trying some raw foods, I'm going to sample a couple of these today. I know I showed you this before, but these chocolate almond tarts, these Hail Mary tarts, are amazingly tasty. I'm also going to do the Persian lime flavor, which is really good. Raw crusts, like the one you can see on here, are actually pretty easy to make. And in the first cookbook that I showed you, the Annie's Raw Food Kitchen, there are a number of different kinds of raw crusts and recipes for them. Typically they're going to involve things like nuts and sweet fruits like dates, because dates are a great raw sweetener. Dates are not actually a dried or cooked fruit, even though they look like it. They're raw. That's just what they do when they're ripe. So you can use stuff to make sweets, even if you're eating raw. And then I'm also going to do something that you're probably a little more familiar with, which is sauerkraut. And this is the sea stag sauerkraut. So you can see it's got a ton of great color to it. This one is a turmeric seaweed flavor. So this will give you a little bit of that zip, and you can kind of taste something savory and something sweet that are both raw. I personally find that the level of preparation involved in an all raw, all the time diet is a little more than I can manage, but I do try to eat raw foods on a pretty regular basis. I typically am at least eating some raw foods with my breakfast and try to sprinkle them in throughout the day, because you're getting different nutrients when you cook a food versus when you eat it raw. Like I said, one of the main things that's broken down in cooking is enzymes, and those are something that we do need for our system. I mean, you can buy them in little bottles, but you can also get them from your food if you're eating some raw foods. So, if you want to try a couple things today, come on down. I'll do this till 5:30 or so. And if you really want to get into raw cooking, I suggest picking up something like this Annie's Raw Living Foods Cookbook. It's got a ton of great recipes, and I don't know if you can see, but this is super dog-eared. Like, I have marked a lot of these pages. Even without having a fully raw diet, there's a lot of great stuff in here that is worth trying. The smoothie recipes alone, there are like nut milk recipes, the pâtés. I mean, it just tastes good. So when food tastes good and it's also good for you, that's a huge bonus. So if you've never tried making raw food, I suggest it. If you want to try some today, come on down. And either way, I hope you guys have a great Tuesday. Bye.